Let's call to order this Thursday, June 20th, 2024 meeting of the Knox County Audit Committee. Haley, could you call roll, please?
Mr. Morrison?
Here.
Mr. Warren? Commissioner Beeler?
Here.
Commissioner Jay? Commissioner Schoonmaker?
Here.
4 members are present.
And we knew Mr. Jay wasn't going to be able to be here. All right, Commissioner Schoonmaker, in your last Audit Committee meeting, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Thank you. Would everyone please rise and face our nation's flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's see if I can trick back in. I'm assuming everybody has a copy of the, or has seen the minutes from the last meeting, the March 19th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. So the next one we have now is item number 5, which will be Finance Director Chris Caldwell.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'll be very brief. I know that you all have a full agenda. I passed out a summary schedule of operating funds basically through May, and you can review that at your leisure. The one thing that I will point out is just focusing on the general fund. You will see that revenues are up about 13.4 million over this time a year ago, but expenses are up about 21.8. And so one thing that we would look at is the net of those numbers. So a year ago, our revenues exceeded our expenses by about 18, I guess, even. And then this year, our revenues are about 9.5 million more. So we're about half of where we were a year ago on revenues over expenses. And so we'll look at that as we close out the year, but you all will remember that we really had a good year last year, which led us to be able to designate some funds at the end of the year. I just wanted to point out that probably won't be the case this year as much, but still in a positive direction. And that's really all I'm going to focus on is the general fund. Everything else, I send out reports to commission every couple of weeks. And so things are trending like we expected. Sales tax is kind of flat. And so unless you all have any type of questions, I'll yield my time to Chris Simons.
Any questions of Chris? All right, thank you very much, sir. In the schools, Chris Simons is here and Ron is not, so I'm not sure your mic's on.
Get this right. All right. Chris Simons, Knox County Schools. I'll keep it brief. Like Chris said, I know you guys have a full agenda. I didn't send anything. I mean, I know you all had received summary, I think at quarter end March 24, last time we were here. I'd be glad to send updated all the way through May if you guys need, but basically the school system continues to be in a solid financial position with our expenditures on track with budget, and we even have some savings in some areas. Revenue collections are positive, like Chris was saying. Our sales tax, we still have a healthy surplus, but I say that with caution just because we don't know kind of where it's going after the flattening off. Well, this whole year it's starting to flatten. It's still positive, but it's probably more conservative budgeting than anything. Lastly, we continue to maintain some healthy fund balance levels. And again, we will increase that fund balance at the close of fiscal year 24. So that's the last thing I have, unless you guys have anything, any questions or.
I don't see any other questions. The only thing I'll ask is when we we won't have another meeting probably until September, so by then you'll have a good idea of, what the year end and everything looks like by then, so.
Yeah, we'll definitely be contributing to fund balance. It's a solid, it will be a solid year. But I'll be glad to, at our next meeting, we'll have year-end numbers for the most part, so it should be good.
All right. Thank you very
All right,
much.
thank you all.
And when we were putting some of this together, I didn't realize so much of this was going to fall on Zach's group, but so we have one more person before that. So Ted Holtz is somehow sick today. He and Ron both. So Gary, you got the floor, please.
Appreciate it. Gary Mitchell, Pew CPA. I apologize. Ted's a little under the weather, so he's asked for me to pinch hit for him this morning. So I also don't have a whole lot to go over. The primary thing I was going to discuss is you all should have all received a letter from us on Pew letterhead, just a few pages long. This is our planning letter that goes to the Audit Committee at the beginning of our audit. So I'm just going to go over it very briefly, and I'll take any questions if you all have any. So this letter just discusses a few things. Number one, the importance of communication between the firm and the Audit Committee. So if you all have any important concerns or insights that you need to provide to us, we welcome those. Discusses the importance of our independence from Knox County and states that we are independent of the county. Discusses a little bit about the audit planning process, including some of the significant risks that we identify as part of the audit. Also discusses our use of the work of internal audit. Internal audit here at Knox County does a fantastic job, and we do review their reports and have discussions with them to help us identify some of the risks that pertain to our audit as well. And then on the last page, it talks about the timing of our audit. You'll notice it says the preliminary audit fieldwork commenced in May of 2024, and final fieldwork is scheduled to begin in September 2024. So we're actually in the final week of our preliminary audit fieldwork. We've been out here for approximately 4 weeks. It's been going good. We've gotten all the support we've needed from both Knox County and Finance and Knox County Schools Finance. So preliminary fieldwork is progressing well, and then we do plan on being back out here in September, which is our normal time frame to begin the final audit fieldwork. That's really all that is in this letter, so if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer those, but if not, that's the only thing I had for today.
Okay, any questions for Gary?
I was just gonna note, I don't think I have a copy of it. I've got the prior ones in my files, but
Oh, okay, you don't have the one that's dated March 4th, 2024?
no, the last one I have in my files was from 23. So
Okay,
if you could just pass that on.
yep,
I mean,
I'll make sure that gets out to you guys.
Yes.
Commissioner Beeler, did you get one? I don't think I got it.
maybe it's not just me then.
Well, I hope Ted didn't send it to me and I was supposed to have done something with it, but I think I got the copy. I'm pretty sure he sent it to Drew. And so-
All right, I'll make sure it gets forwarded back out to y'all. It is substantially the same as last year's letter. There's no change in identified significant risks or anything like that. It's a pretty standard letter, and then the schedule for our field work, both preliminary and final phase, is substantially the same as last year. So there's really no significant changes this year that we have to communicate. So, but thanks for bringing that to our attention.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I have it in my record.
Okay.
Great. Thanks, Gary.
All right, thank you.
Next. Let's see. Zach, do we want to go and let Richard do his too, and then come back to you? So Richard's got 2 reports to go over. And
Hey, good morning. Richard Pugh, Knox County Internal Audit. Like you said, got 2 audits to go over this morning, so I'm going to try not to get super confused between the 2. The 2 audits, Knox County Fleet Management and Knox County Sheriff's Office IT Inventory. We'll start with the Fleet Management audit and go on from there. So basically, we did this audit because of Knox County's dependence on vehicles to accomplish the mission of Knox County. It's a high-risk area, high auditable risk area, and yeah, I just want to first say that between risk management, fleet service center, engineering public works, it was a great process with, around the fleet audit. We had tremendous response, and they really worked well to get us the information we needed, and really worked well with us. Let's see here. Okay, so the fleet safety program is basically a shared responsibility between risk management, fleet service center, elected officials / department heads, and employees. So everybody has a role to play in that, and all those responsibilities are kind of laid out in the fleet service manual. We kind of set off on the audit with 3 conclusionary questions to answer. Are fleet participants adhering to Knox County Fleet Safety Program requirements? Our risk management have accurate and up-to-date records related to program requirements, driver safety, eligibility, accident documentation, and Fleet Service Center adhering to requirements of the fleet maintenance schedule. And we found that generally, yes, that is all happening. We did have some findings related to some of these areas, but essentially we tested 4 major categories: take-home vehicle testing, accident response, fleet vehicle maintenance, driver safety and eligibility. So driver safety and eligibility, we had no findings related to that area. All the documentation was there. All the background checks are done. Risk management's doing a tremendous job with that stuff. To hop into the findings. So finding 1, noncompliance with Knox County Fleet Safety Program and Municipal Code Section 2.2. This is kind of a 2-part finding.
Which page are you on?
Sorry, page 4 of the audit, so starting at findings.
Gotcha.
So it's really a 2-part finding. It's a little bit complicated, but I'm gonna do my best to explain it. So we were testing take-home drivers. So the way we did that is there's criteria in the fleet safety program that take-home drivers must adhere to 500 miles in excess of commute per month. The way we tested that was we pulled GPS data for those vehicles. We were able to test 38 drivers from that list and found that only 10 were meeting that threshold. So in some discussions with risk management, we found that, you know, that those policies were severely dated, to say the least, and that might not necessarily match up with the objectives of Knox County government. So we tested it. You know, we had a finding related to that, and we found that, you know, that policy was written some time ago, hadn't necessarily been revised. So our recommendation on that part was to either adhere to that criteria or update the regulations to come more in line with what we expected from our take-home drivers. Kind of the second part, moving on really to page 5, is there were some vehicles that did not have a GPS equipped to them. So the GPS acknowledgement form in the fleet program manual states that Knox County vehicles are equipped with GPS devices. So we found that some were not. So we're trying to figure out why that is, and we found that many of the elected offices did not have GPS in their vehicles. And the way it was kind of working was it was kind of opt-in, opt-out scenario, and there had been a lot of elected offices that had opted out of the program. But based on you know, what we were reading from the criteria, that would be required of them to have. So we did a little digging and found Municipal Code Chapter 2, Section 2.2, which basically states that, let's see here, whenever a county vehicle is assigned to an elected official or an employee, it shall be designated under applicable rules and regulations by the county executive on who may drive that vehicle. So essentially, the county executive had authority on who would be in charge of assigning that vehicle. But getting into this code, we kind of found that that's not necessarily how things are going either. The mayor doesn't necessarily assign vehicles to employees. The Fleet Service Center acts as an internal service fund, so it's kind of open to all Knox County departments and is used as a service for elected offices and departments. But it does, in there, talk about rules and regulations. It's kind of ambiguous. So Basically, our recommendation was to bring that more in line with current practices. I mean, I think this original piece of legislation was created in the early 90s. You know, there wasn't a ton of GPS data that we could put in vehicles back then. It was super expensive. I think now that GPS is kind of at the forefront, we can GPS a vehicle in Knox County for like $170 a year, which is fairly cost effective, as opposed to kind of previous. So our recommendation there was to kind of bring those policies more in line with current practices. Let's see, moving on to finding 2, which is page 6. Lack of required documentation for vehicular accidents. So the title of that sounds bad. I mean, you can see the chart there below. All the categories are above 85%. So there were just a few pieces of documentation that we were missing, mainly photos from the vehicle scene. I mean, a lot of things can affect that. Did the person have to go in an ambulance? Were they able to take the photo? Stuff like that. Supervisor accident investigation report, some of the time that wasn't filled out. So our recommendation here is basically just make sure that we get this documentation, and I think it's just follow up with the departments, with the Fleet Service Center, by risk management to kind of make sure that we have these documents.
So you say there's, so some of them were pictures that were missing. What were some of, there are 12 altogether, is that right?
Correct, yeah.
12 instances.
12 missing pieces of documentation across our universe of testing. So there were 38 accidents, 12 pieces of documentation were missing, and each accident requires 4 different pieces of documentation. So,
Okay.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
On your last meeting. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Does the Knox County Sheriff's Office respond to any county vehicle accident other than if it's involving that particular department?
I'm not sure I understand.
Meaning, so whenever, even if it's a fender bender, do they respond so that we have a permanent record that a law enforcement agency, you know,
Yeah,
took the information and all that?
that might be a Randy question. I'm not completely sure on that one.
Randy who?
Randy Smith, risk management.
I'm kidding.
Randy Smith, Knox County Risk Management.
Hey, Randy, I'm not used to seeing you down there. You're usually sitting up here, although it's been a couple of years, so.
Those days are over, sir.
Welcome back. Good.
It is our policy that in any accident that the sheriff's office is called and they do respond. As you're well aware that if you have an accident on private property, the police normally will not show up. But if it's a county vehicle, they will show up to do our reports.
Okay, so they have basically 100% coverage on all of the accidents?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, sometimes, John, you'll have somebody that, I'm sorry, Commissioner Schoonmaker, you'll have somebody that'll back into a pole at Weigels, you know, one of the ballards there.
Yeah.
That's some of the missing photos or things like that.
Okay.
But yes, if it is an accident that involves another vehicle or has damages in excess of $600, they do call the sheriff's office and they do come out and report.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir.
Excellent. Moving on to finding 3, into page 6, starting page 7. So we found an inconsistent take-home driver list. So the Fleet Service Center and payroll basically had 2 separate lists of who take-home drivers were. The more important list is the payroll list, considering, because that's where we deduct the fringe benefits from W-2. So making sure that that list is accurate is very important. We found that kind of the lists were inconsistent. Our basic recommendation there is for those 2 entities to work together to make sure that we have an accurate list. And I think steps have been taken to make sure that is communicated, because I think in the new practice, if you want to take on vehicle, you must submit a form, and it has to be sent to payroll, Fleet Service Center, and risk management, so everybody's kind of on the same page. I know things can kind of get convoluted with decentralized command, but communication is key in that respect. And moving on to finding 4, this was our final finding for the fleet audit, lack of preventative maintenance. So the Fleet Service Center has a maintenance schedule that they use to make sure that our fleet is healthy and in good standing. We basically took that schedule, tested it against maintenance records, and for the vast majority, we found that maintenance is being conducted in a timely and appropriate fashion by the Fleet Service Center. We did find some past due inspections, and it's a challenge for the Fleet Service Center, and we learned this kind of throughout the process, because when you're dealing with elected offices, departments, getting people to come in and get their oil change is typically low on their list. So I think that, especially the improvements that have been made from finding 1, so adding the fleet service or the fleet manual to the code will actually help enforcement of some of the maintenance issues as well. So. Cool. I think that is everything I had on fleet. Do I have any questions? Generally, the responses by management, they concurred with the responses. I think changes have already been made. I'm pretty sure that
So what are we doing on a couple of the earlier items, what was it, the 500 miles and maybe not having GPS in all of them?
yeah, so I think what happened where I think changes have already been made to kind of eliminate that criteria and include more of a formal process of applying to have a take-home vehicle, and then including a cost analysis within that form. So there's kind of a cost analysis and approval, goes to risk management, payroll, and the Fleet Service Center to make sure everybody's on the same page with who's taking vehicles home. And then GPSs, I think, have been added to all vehicles at this point.
Okay, so I guess what I'm hearing is some of this was just instances of perhaps some of it was done in earlier years, or some of the
Correct, yeah.
requirements. Are we in pretty good shape now on
Yeah.
these, and they've already done these or will do, or?
I think we're in good shape. The last I heard on it, I think almost everybody was in compliance with the manual now. So everybody's been brought kind of into the GPS program. But for accountability, for safety, that's an important thing for, based on our hotline, we've had a lot of, vehicle type hotline things. And if someone has GPS in their vehicle, it's a lot easier to solve that hotline. So I think we're in really good shape at this point. And I think this really is an impactful change that's going to help things going towards the future.
Okay, because I know the GPS has been an issue sometimes when complaints or things have been brought up, and then if you had that
I think we've
information-
got it resolved. I think it is in good shape at this point. Yeah.
Okay, we'll put that as the recommendation, is that you've got it under control, so. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Schoonmaker?
Well, I'm thinking, so where payroll didn't know that somebody had a take-home vehicle, is that something potentially could have affected our audits in the future, where it shows somebody got a extra benefit, but it wasn't accounted for?
Yeah, I think we got lucky here that it was more the fleet service list was kind of incorrect, and that departments and elected officials weren't reporting accurate take-home vehicles to the Fleet Service Center. So I think we got lucky in that respect, but, to avoid any potential of that scenario happening, that's why we wanted everybody to kind of work together, make sure that the list is accurate, and make sure that we're making the proper deductions on people's paychecks.
So from a payroll standpoint, I think things were in pretty good shape.
Yes, sir.
Is that what I'm hearing? Okay. Any other, Matt?
Just one quick question on the management response. I just want to make sure I understand the process right. We've got the 3 findings acknowledged by Randy and risk management. And then it looks like the 4th one, we have the inter-office memo, but I'm just making sure, do we need something in the files that states clearly that they concur with the
As far as the
finding 4?
finding 4
I don't
from,
think it was addressed in the risk management response.
Oh, I'm sorry, if you flip one more page, I think it should be there by Jim Snowden responded that, because we had to break it up.
Yeah, okay. I'm just making sure that that's,
Yeah, I think they concurred with it, so, and I think changes have been made, and they're gonna start sending out reminders to departments and elected officials.
we concur with the finding. So it seemed like the response versus the remediation versus the response, I guess. That's what I was.
Well, I mean, I guess they could have done a joint letter or something, but just, yeah, I understand, yeah.
Just making sure we're talking.
Yeah, we've kind of made a practice when we'll basically get multiple responses from whoever owns that, so that they're, it's on them to take care of, basically. Cool. Anything else on fleet?
I think that's it. So we're on to the next one.
Okay, switching gears and going to Knox County Sheriff's Office IT inventory. This was an audit that we did that was in a series. We started with seized inventory with the Sheriff's Office, then we moved to non-seized, and now we have moved to IT inventory. So we have kind of hit all the major bases for the Sheriff's Office inventory stuff. Again, I just want to take a second and commend the technology division with the Sheriff's Office. Captain Yarnell, his team do a great job, and we're very responsive throughout this audit, and always answers the phone, always sending us stuff. That goes a long way in our world, that someone is easily accessible and that they're willing to give the information that's requested. Just a little background on the technology division. It was created in 2018. It includes cyber forensics, digital communications, digital intelligence, information technology, organized retail crime, and the sex offender registry. The two main units that we dealt with during this audit was the digital intelligence unit and the information and technology wing of the division. So digital intelligence unit handles hotspots, cell phones, iPads, stuff like that. Cellular devices is kind of their domain as far as inventory and custody. And then the IT side is computers, printers, your basic IT equipment. So again, we had three conclusionary questions for this one. Are there sufficient control environment to support the accuracy of the IT inventory records maintained by KCSO? Is in-scope inventory routinely verified for accuracy regarding both assigned items and those stored in inventory? And are there sufficient separation of duties related to inventory storage, issuance, tracking, and custody? And we found that generally, yes, on all accounts, that those were happening. We did have some findings related to those questions, and we'll get into those. Just to kind of give a little background on how the IT management works. So they use mainly two programs to track IT inventory. Endpoint, MOS 360. Endpoint tracks laptops, desktops, things like that, and then MOS 360 tracks those cellular devices. So the way Endpoint works is you sign into your device, Endpoint automatically assigns that device to you in the system. So it's a continuous tracking mechanism that is automated and saves the information technology division a lot of time. Same thing with MOS 360. So it's based on the cellular data. So we have a contract with AT&T. We get iPhones every year. They do a swap every single year on the iPhones. And at that time, inventory is taken, updates in MOS 360 are made, and that helps verify that those records are accurate. So we tested three basic areas. System to employee, which was we took the data from Endpoint, MOS 360, and we pulled a sample of that and tested it to make sure that the system had the correct IT inventory for that employee. So we just, got in contact with the employee. Hey, do you have this piece of IT equipment? They did. We found almost no issues in the system to employee, that it was pretty sound. And then our second step of testing was employee to system. So we sampled random employees and asked them for a list of all their IT equipment. Now, we did find some IT devices that were not in the endpoint system or the MOS 360 system. We'll get into that in just a second. And then we tested printers. So Thermocopy handles KCSO printers. They're a third-party vendor. Basically, KCSO handed them the printer responsibility. So they kind of did a hands-off approach on that, handed it to Thermocopy, and we did some checks to make sure that that information was correct. So hopping into finding on page 3, finding 1, incomplete IT records. So this finding was related to our employee to system testing about devices not being in the system. And it's like, why are the devices not in the system? So if a device hasn't been logged into, it won't be in the system because the endpoint can't pick it up. It can't be in the system. So, and a lot of older devices and we found that some devices that probably should have been surplused, or for example, there were a couple instances of people on military leave that hadn't had their devices registered in the system that were not there. So we found a couple instances of that happening, and we've basically recommended that and here's Captain Yarnell right now with the Knox County Sheriff's Office. So we found that basically there were some devices that weren't in the system, and we've recommended, hey, take steps to remedy that situation and do an inventory on it. And then also the second kind of part of that was the MOS 360 side of that. So there were some iPads that were not connected to the cellular network that were tracked through another spreadsheet. And we found that one of those devices was not on that spreadsheet. So, figuring out iPads that are not in the cellular data system and making sure that those are documented appropriately on that spreadsheet. So getting into finding 2 a little bit, inaccurate printer records for inaccurate printer inventory records. So Thermocopy, like I said, handles the printer stuff, and they had an Excel sheet that was allegedly tracking the updates for printers, but we found that essentially Thermocopy hadn't updated the spreadsheet, wasn't keeping it accurate. So we've recommended that KCSO create their own tracking mechanism for printers just to make sure that Thermocopy's doing what they're supposed to do. And then finally, finding 3, improper disposal of KCS hard drives. So it sounds worse than it is. So basically, what was happening is there's an employee in Knox County Sheriff's Office that was taking surplus hard drives home and drilling them out and bringing them back to be surplus. So, we wanted to alleviate that risk from him. So we essentially recommended that process be done in-house with appropriate segregation of duties to avoid potential data breaches or, future risk problems. And then lastly, we had a couple opportunities for improvement. We found that it was possible for different employees to kind of swap devices, cellular devices, iPads, hotspots, stuff like that, because there's not any identifying mark on the outside of the device. So we kind of suggested that, you could put some kind of sticker or something that either had the name or the serial number of the device to avoid those kind of mix-ups. For example, like 2 officers working together, they both have hotspots, they're identical, they get up, one picks one up, the other one picks the other up, they could have swapped devices. And then lastly, hotspots are tracked through a spreadsheet. We were able to find device custody for all of the hotspots. However, the spreadsheet hadn't been 100% updated, so our opportunity for improvement there is just keep that spreadsheet updated. And I think that basically does it. Again, I want to commend Captain Yarnell and his team on doing a great job down there. They've been awesome to work with. If you have any questions, I'd take them now.
Any questions? And this is Captain Yarnell here. Well, I appreciate all y'all's help in letting these guys get all their work done. And
Can I say something?
please,
I just wanted to brag on these guys. I know you don't hear bragging on top of the, here, let me, Captain Aaron Yarnell, Knox County Sheriff's Office. I just wanted to brag publicly about these guys. You don't hear that a whole lot, but they was extremely professional, came in at a large task at hand, obviously, with the amount of devices that we have. Well communicated with us. Mark standing for Angie Daniels, my supervisor in the 2 units, couldn't speak more highly of them and their staff. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you so much.
thank you. He's talking about Richard, huh? Great. All right, are we through with,
I've got
oh, I'm sorry.
2 questions.
2 questions.
Yeah. I wanted to go back real quick to finding 1. Okay. I know you mentioned in the note identifying 6 laptops. Were those, I just want to make sure I understood from a completeness standpoint, from the testing perspective, how were those 6 found? Was it inventorying what folks had on hand?
Okay, so the way that we tested that is we got a sample of employees, we contacted those employees, and we asked for a list of all their IT devices, so laptops, computers, or desktops, cell phones, and then they responded with that information. So we got those serial numbers from them and then compared them to the system to see if it matched.
And how big was that population? 6 feels like a pretty large number. From a
Yeah,
sample.
so we did so it was, let's see, 23, let's see, let me look at this. So I think we had 23 employees, let's see. 24 employees in our sample. So, and we went with a smaller sample size there as far, because each employee could have up to 6 different devices. So, yes, but when we kind of were looking at the actual circumstances, so the military leave individuals hadn't been back to log in their system. And the good news is that anytime that we had a question about it, they were able to track down the circumstances for that device. So I think 2 of the devices were with one individual. They had juvenile records on them. They were being stored basically to maintain those records. Now, should those records have been taken to IT and that information be offloaded and those devices be surplus? Yes, and that's kind of why we had a finding related to this. Does that?
It does, I guess. I just have a level of concern around identifying 6 out of 24 and thinking about the population of Knox County employees. I mean, that could
so
potentially be a
it's
pretty significant amount of equipment out there that's not
potentially,
captured in
yes.
inventory. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why we've kind of recommended that, they do a comprehensive audit of that system and try to bring those devices back into the fold.
Is there any plans for anything beyond this, just to kind of follow that and ensure? I mean, I do feel like that is a potential risk there.
Yeah, definitely a risk. I mean, and we will follow up. We follow up on the recommendations, within a year's time and make sure that kind of steps have been taken and see how many devices have been kind of found or identified. And I know one of the reasons was endpoint, after you go idle for 6 months, you just drop out of the endpoint system. And now they're receiving a report to make sure that those devices are captured. So it's, and a couple of the iPad so the non-cellular iPad situation, there was about 20 iPads that were not connected to cellular. And it was one that, was not on there, but, it's hard to determine how many are out there. It's really an unknown, and that's kind of why we bring it up, is that it is a risk, and we feel like that it should be addressed.
I'll just look for some follow-up on that. And then item 3, I know we talk about, not being as bad as it sounds, but I think if I'm reading it right, the typical process is those come back, they're returned to the technology division, and then they get picked up by property management for disposal, for final disposal.
Correct.
Did we go back and check that all items that leave are coming back.
Well,
Yes, that feels like a very big risk that you have one person walking away with those hard drives.
correct. We did check, we didn't check all of the surplus information, but we did check some surplus information to make sure that things were being documented and that surplus property was being documented out. Now, did we check every single hard drive that went out the door? No, we did not. You know, I think we probably could have added that to our testing on the next round, but
I can comment on that too, if you don't mind.
Yep.
Reading that, you know, I know it's kind of, you know, it's kind of broad as in what you guys are probably thinking. Mark Stanifer, who is our supervisor, or network administrator in our IT department, when a laptop or desktop comes in for surplus, which means they're getting swapped out to new equipment, turning up a piece of old equipment, normally they would wipe the hard drives, right? Just format the hard drives. But to take an extra step, because I'm also a supervisor over the cyber forensics unit, so I realize how some data cannot be washed when it comes to formatting hard drives. So Mark was taking an extra step and was drill pressing the hard drives, 4 drill holes into the hard drive itself before turning it over to the surplus department. So basically, he was taking, they was removing the hard drives, he was taking them, because he had a drill press, he would drill press them, bring them back in, then surplus them. So based off their recommendation, which you can see in my reply, we have set up to purchase the drill press for one of our offsites at Bernard Avenue to be able to, so he can go over there, drill press them, instead of taking the liability of him having them in his vehicle or sitting in his driveway to drill press those. So that's just kind of a more detailed look at that.
Right, I mean, and I get that the process has improved now, but I think I just want to make sure that there's some testing at least in place to say, here's all the hard drives. I'm assuming they're all individually labeled or serial numbered or something along those way. I mean, it seems like it'd be an easy, here's what has been taken offline, here's what we have the record of disposing, and make sure there's none missing.
Yes, sir. When they come back in, I didn't mean to interrupt you. When he would bring the hard drives back in, they would, you know, surplus the hard drives based off of the inventory for surplus. So, but I understand what you're saying, yes,
Yeah,
sir.
that's just looking at the fact that it seems like a significant number of hard drives left possession of the county to some extent and came back. I just want to make sure they all did come back.
Yes, sir. And I mean, we would even, you know, based off the sheriff's opinion, if he doesn't want us to drill the hard drives for that extra layer of security, you know, that'd be a decision for him. This was something that the IT supervisor took upon himself to say, you know what, I'm going to make sure that this data is off of these hard drives, and, you know, would drill press them himself. This isn't a requirement by CJIS, it isn't a requirement by the state. This is something, an extra layer to help protect our users from a data breach, from basically surplus, you know, selling, because we see, you know, they sell it on gov bids, and they'll put a whole pallet full of old equipment and sell it.
Yeah.
So we're just making sure that nothing leaked, so nothing got out.
I just know how much data can be on those. I mean, even, like you said, wiped out, so.
Yes, sir.
That's where my.
Yes, sir.
That helps.
Thank you.
Commissioner Schoonmaker, any questions?
Yeah, I just had a question. On the printers, did the existing printers that were in the inventory at the sheriff's office, when they switched over to have thermocopy handle it, were all those printers removed and surplused, and then thermocopy came in and gave you all brand new ones?
Yes, sir. I'll explain that process a little bit of detail. Printers obviously is a big support issue. You know, something don't print when you have over 1,000 employees and a lot of printers. We was looking to outsource that to a third party. That way we wasn't ordering ink every other day. So our lease agreement with Thermocopy was for them to come in, see what we have, and that's been over, I have to look at the contract on the exact numbers. That's been over, you know, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. To come in, see what we had in place, utilize whatever equipment that we could utilize with our larger printers, and then them take over those printers and also be able to bring in new printers where we needed the larger printers for the secretaries, administration, you know, whatever was needed. So that finding, I was kind of surprised because Thermocopy, we was basing, you know, our documentation off of what Thermocopy provided to us. There was 2 printers that was not the same serial number out of the detention facility and a work release. So when we went back to Thermocopy, I was like, oh, it's an error on our part. So in the finding, to help remedy that, we now have an IT member that will be doing a separate log, just to make sure thermocopy is placing the right serial numbers. You can see it's the right model, the right printer, but they wasn't looking at the serial numbers to see. We was relying on thermocopy, who we pay as a third, party vendor, to keep up with whatever they had, So basically, we added another layer in there. I know he mentioned, and in the report, there was 3 different inventory systems that we currently use. We also have a 4th system that we have a fresh service. It's a ticketing service. So on top of when the hardware comes in, it's documented in inventory, in our inventory, in our stockroom through Sortly. It's then placed in Endpoint. Once it's assigned to a user, an IT tech will then put it into that database. He'll also put it into the fresh service ticketing system, which also is another trail for that hardware. And then lastly is the MOS 360 for all the iPhones and iPads. When I started this process with Sheriff Spangler, told him there was a lot of better prices we could get on some hardware based off of cellular contracts, cellular agreements. So we moved to iPhones and iPads with cellular service on them, so that way it can be tracked through MOS 360 as well as through the cellular network. Basically, MOS 360 is a secondary inventory system that we pay for. All 4 of those products for inventory controls, we pay for it. That was one thing that I wanted to do is, get a good firm, a good firm idea of what we had in stock and track it from the point it came off of the UPS truck, through IT, because it's going to a lot of different places. Basically, the fresh service that was mentioned with the ticketing service, that is another layer of tracking of our hardware. I just wanted to throw that out as well.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, and also with the iPads and iPhones, we trade them in every year for credit, 1 to 2 years based off the contract. So they'll give us credit back for the devices and then send us the new devices. So that's how we swap over 700 iPhones.
Hey, Richard, I noticed and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but in the schedule that Zach has in his package, he always has at the back of it a listing of the open recommendations of everything. And I noticed there's 3 of them in there for the IT inventory audit. And it sounds like, and if you don't know right off the top, I'm wondering if these really have already been closed. I mean, I know you give them a year to come back and see if they've done it, but I just didn't know if some of these, sounds like maybe they've already been done.
Yeah, I think the majority, I think it's going to take them some time to track down some of these devices that are not in the system. So I think that part of it will take some time. But as far as the hard drive finding,
Right.
And then finding 2, I think those are resolved currently, and we'll check those on retest, and then. But finding 1, I think will take them a little bit more time and legwork. I know some adjustment has been made with the endpoint system.
Right.
But figuring out the devices that are out there that we don't know about is going to be a challenge.
And so, but I guess we're feeling okay then on the printers issues and concerns and I assume this is the hard drive destruction issue. That seems like that's under control.
Correct.
Okay. And I don't know if that helps answer any of Matt's concerns, but at least that's, one way of tracking these, although I don't know that we always know the follow-up a year later on some of these, where they get taken care of.
Yeah, I think that's where I think we're doing a good job finding where there are process improvements. I just want to make sure that we're going back and looking at the totality to make sure that there's not another risk out there that we're not considering as part of our testing.
Okay. All right. Any other questions of Richard on this second audit? So Zach, are we ready to move on to your part here? Captain Yarnell, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for what you guys do.
Richard, thanks.
All right, good morning, Audit Committee. Zach Fullerton, Knox County Internal Audit. Hope you're all doing well today on the summer solstice. I was at the mayor's budget presentation early last month, and when he walked up to the podium, he received a standing ovation from the crowd and from the county commission. So I'll assume everyone's waiting to do that until the end of my presentation. So thanks in advance. Let's go ahead and jump into it. In your board
Along with
packets.
Mr. Schoonmaker's and Richie's.
Let's jump into your board packet. So I'm starting on page 2, which is the list of closed and ongoing projects. First, of course, you have the fleet management audit. You just heard about it. You know, really happy with the results of that audit. I think that the changes management is making and have made are going to be really beneficial for the county moving forward. You know, just thank Randy and his team for getting those policy changes and the ordinance changes written and in front of commission, and of course, thanks to commission for approving. I think the Fleet Safety Program Manual was a Mark Jones creation, if you guys remember Mark. Yeah,
Yep.
so it was a little dated and just needed some updates.
Mark, they used to handle the hotline.
I remember that,
And
yeah.
that was before they got a hold of the audit process here and to where we were satisfied that, you know, y'all could take care of that, so.
So, yeah, I think just a lot of value in that audit. I think the findings sort of support us to continue on and do, you know, schools fleet and sheriff's fleet, which are both on our plan for fiscal year 25, but we can get into that in a bit. Next on the list is the Sheriff's Office IT inventory audit that you just heard, finalized it last week. You know, thanks to Captain Yarnell and his team for their responsiveness, really allowed us to get through it on time. I think overall, as you just heard, that they are doing a good job. You know, some items to clean up. I think it will be relatively easy fixes. But I do think, you know, to Matt's point, I think those were some good recommendations on maybe some follow-up testing that we could come in and do once improvements are made, just to make sure that we did identify what's out there and not in the system and got it in the system. So we'll definitely keep that on our radar. You know, kudos to Richard and Lori as well for getting that audit done. If you don't know Lori, she's not here today, but she's one of those people who can talk to anybody and be friends with anybody. So we asked her to get in contact with all the sheriff's office employees, and she was like, got it done, got the information really quick. So she's great. And then also, I'd just say on those 2 completed projects, you know, eventually the idea is to have Lori and the other staff present the audits. I don't want that responsibility to fall solely on Richard, especially when we have multiple projects to talk about in a day. So just look forward to that in the future when they're leading projects.
Good.
Next on the list is the fiscal year 25 risk assessment. So, you know, no report for that, but we did finish it up at the end of May. Ultimately, I had put together a list of 96 stakeholders throughout the county, so general county, school, sheriff's office, and then county adjacent. We met with 24 of those, so about a fourth of those stakeholders. That included, so Superintendent Ryswick, all of the assistant superintendents. We met with Chief Bernie Lyon, Allison Rogers, and Sheriff's Finance. You know, of course, the mayor's chief of staff, Dwight and Chris. Met with Jane Burrett, Stephanie Candler, Jim Snowden. So that's not all inclusive, but just and give you an idea of who we met with. In those meetings, we were really trying to talk through, you know, financial risks, staffing risks, the maturity of their training programs, their onboarding programs, their offboarding programs, budget concerns. So it's a lot of information to take in. And then we sort of took all that information and basically tried to score each department on some, you know, a variety of key risk indicators. And then we develop our audit plan based on that. Now, there's always going to be a little subjectivity in that, right? So, you know, to defray that a little bit, we always tried to have at least 2 auditors for each meeting, so you at least had 2, you know, points of input. I will say that those meetings and the debriefs after, they're very time-consuming, they're very draining. I know I always have a you know, ever-present sunny disposition, but as an introvert, it was very draining, and we got done with some of those days. I think we were all ready to be done. But I do think it's a valuable exercise. You know, one, it helps me, it helps the staff just to educate ourselves about the other county functions and what's going on around the county. And then 2, it also serves a little bit of a marketing purpose. You know, we get to go out and allows me to tell other departments, hey, here's what we do, here's how we can be of value for you. So that's sort of the reasoning behind that project. And I think one of our jobs in internal audit is, in addition to doing audits, is just to bring awareness of risks in the county. for consideration of the Audit Committee and for consideration of Knox County Commission. So a handful of things I just wanted to point out that we heard during those meetings quite a bit. The first one, office space in the city-county building. I think we all probably know that that's a concern. Supposedly, this building is at 100% capacity.
Where are you on your schedule here?
Going off the packet, yeah, sorry. But yeah, so office space, and you know, at 100% capacity, when we talk to PBA, there's obviously a lot of renovations that are needed for the building, maybe potentially window replacements. So, you know, where do you put people when you need to do those renovations? It is an area of concern. It's a question mark for the county going forward, especially as we continue to grow and add to our workforce. And, you know, multiple departments would say, we would like to have more space, but, you know, it's not really possible in this building right now. The second thing, of course, you know, recruitment and retention. Got a shout out during a lot of the risk meetings with the cost of living in Knoxville rising so exponentially, you know, versus employee pay. Obviously, our own department can attest to it. You know, it's really hard to find qualified people, and then if you are lucky enough to get them, they might leave and jump to a higher paying job with the TVAs, the ORNLs, sometimes even the city. So I do think there's a little bit of improvement on that post-COVID. I think, you know, for our vacancies in the county, that applications are up, but I do expect it, you know, really to remain an issue going forward. The county offers, in my opinion, a fairly competitive benefits package, but you know, for a lot of the younger generation, what do they care about? It's pay at the end of the day. And I do think as well, in just informal conversations with some county employees, there might be a feeling of they look on with envy, you know, oh, sheriff's office got a big raise last year, teachers are getting a big raise this year, you know, when is it going to be the general county's turn? But I think the mayor and Chris, you know, they're trying some different things. They're looking at alternatives, alternative benefits. So I think, you know, they're aware and they're trying to combat some of those issues, but it's the reality of the world we live in now, unfortunately. Two other things I wanted to mention from the risk assessment meetings. We heard a little bit of trepidation about the compensation study for Knox County Schools and the implementation of those results. I'm sure you've seen in the news. Recently, they've got a lot of feedback from that. You know, so we did hear that a lot. It's definitely an area that's on the top of our minds. It's a really big undertaking for Ron and his team, Ron McPherson and his team, and everyone in business and talent at schools. So we're probably going to want to come in on the back end, maybe just provide some additional assurances in that area once that implementation is over.
Are you talking about, you said been in the news lately, the test scores? And
No, so the schools did a compensation study to bring teachers and admin and, you know, custodial workers up to market value. They just implemented it. I think Ron told us that when other districts have done something similar, they did like a 12-month implementation period. Well, we did a 3-month implementation period, right? So there's been a lot of feedback, a lot of concern. I think people don't really understand exactly how it was implemented, or maybe had concerns that they didn't get the full raise they should have got based on their position. So that's what's been in the news lately.
And that was, you're talking primarily in the schools now, correct?
Yeah, just schools for that.
Yeah, don't know that Chris has done that. Anyway, Mr. Caldwell will take care of that.
Yeah. So the last thing,
Finance people.
I think on some of the customer service departments, can maybe just do a little bit better on getting information out to other county departments. And when I say customer service departments, I'm talking about departments that in some capacity exist to aid other departments. So a good example would be internal audit, but then you also have finance, procurement, HR, IT. You know, we want to make sure that all of the policies and procedures that we expect our employees to abide by are well communicated. We don't want someone to say, oh, I wasn't aware, or oh, I was never trained on that. Chris and I have talked about it, you know, for finance, and I'll keep having those conversations with some of the other departments just to make sure we're doing a good job of that. So anyway, the plan going forward, you know, for the risk assessments, just to keep doing that. Like I said, we hit about a fourth of them in April and May. We'll probably do another fourth in the fall. You know, do another round just to continue building out our risk universe.
Zach, I don't know how to ask for your help on this, but, you know, you know, the whole risk assessment thing is something that's, you know, pretty high on our radar screen as far as what's going on here. And I've always wondered, are we doing enough of it? And some of it's, whether it's in, you know, some of the internal controls, all these things. Several years ago, in my earlier time on the Audit Committee, Pew came in and gave us their walkthrough of control evaluation. Now, it had a lot more to do with dollar thresholds and accounts and stuff like this. And I remember initially I had to get some reprieve from the law director's office that I could attend, because I think they were trying to say I was making it perhaps a public meeting or something like that, you know, with maybe because it was, I can't remember who else was in there. But anyway, it was very helpful. It wasn't anything that we could take home with us, but it gave us an idea. And I really like what you've described you've done, you know, with all these meetings and everything. And I don't think any of us would have wanted to sit in on all of that, but maybe if there's some way to give us I don't feel like I really understand the overview of what you're doing.
Sure.
But I think it's it's critical. I think it's very necessary. So
Sure.
give some thought to that and let's talk about it, because I don't, you know, you and I talk pretty much anyway, and I have some ideas of what's going on. So, and Matt, I don't know if from your perspective, you know, you're used to these things, I guess, in your all's world anyway. But I feel Audit Committee ought to have a little better feel for how that's being put together. Don't
Sure.
need all the nuts and bolts, but so.
Okay.
give
Yeah,
that
I'll
some
try to
thought.
figure out a way we can have that discussion and get a little bit more transparency on that process. Luckily, Commissioner Beeler he did sit on one for the county clerk's office, was here, so he got to see some insight in it. Obviously, he works in that department, so he got a little more insight than everyone else. But
Okay, good.
so, okay, still on page 2, just real quick on the school's fleet management audit. It's going to be very similar in scope to the county's fleet management audit. We're pretty deep into that already, a little bit easier since we have some templates from the general county's audit that we can sort of base our field work on. And the goal for that one is to have it completed and to present at the September meeting. So let's move to page 3. Staff news, first off, wanted to welcome, you know, Harrison Lewis, who joined our office in April. Harrison was previously working with Apex Bank as a fraud analyst, and he'll be a staff auditor in our office. Harrison is actually in the reserves for the National Guard, and this is his on-site training week. So he's on military leave this week, which is why he's not here. But really excited to have him. He's picked up everything quickly, and hopefully he will retire with internal audit in 30 years from now. Unfortunately, shortly after Harrison joined us, we lost Spencer at the end of May. You know, Spencer had his general contractor's license. He's going to try his hand at building homes. He left on good terms. He said he loved working for us, but I think the opportunity to build homes in an area that desperately needs homes, I think, you know, just too good to pass up, but hated to lose him. We have posted that position, the staff auditor position. We actually interviewed some candidates earlier this week. We're working through that process. It might get reposted again, potentially after the 4th of July, you know, post-holiday, might get a little more interest. Not 100% sure right now, but as always, we'll keep working at it. One day, my dream will come true of having a fully staffed office, I promise you.
Just make sure you stay here with it.
What's that?
Just make sure you're still here.
Yeah. Okay, so next on the list is just, you know, a quick update, Dynetics application control engagement. As a reminder, Dynetics was looking at 3 separate applications: the Employee Requisition app, the Election Commission Voter Registration app, and the Inmate Management System app. And then they also did an overall review of the system development lifecycle. So we got all those reports, thought it was good work, sent them over to IT, and I got a formal response from IT's application director, Antoine. So they're working through some remediation steps regarding those findings, but generally they agreed with everything. Didn't send those out because they are confidential, but we do have Dynetics on site today, and we do want to discuss those results in an executive session, which I guess we can vote on later, but the mayor's conference room was not available for this hour. We do have the finance conference room on the 6th floor, so that's where I would suggest that we meet for that. A few odds and ends odd and end items there on the bottom of page 3. I just wanted to give credit to Lori on something. So she noticed during the CRE of the health department's fee collection that the credit card fees that the processing company were collecting seemed to be really high at $2 a transaction. And maybe that doesn't seem high, but it is high when you're only paying $10 and then 20% of your overall due is in a fee. So she brought it to the attention of procurement. Procurement, was able to negotiate a new agreement, got it reduced by 50% down to $1. And I think that's just a win for our community and the clients of the health department. A lot of these individuals might be on income-based fee schedules, maybe potentially, lower income individuals where this will make a difference for them. So I just wanted to say good job on her part for sort of going above and beyond and pulling that thread. Next, I'm not sure if everybody knows this, but the Institute of Internal Auditors, though they designate May as Internal Audit Awareness Month, I think generally that's just a good time to sort of think about our marketing efforts and whether the other departments in the county sort of know who we are and what we do. When I was at ORNL, the Internal Audit Department actually decorated the offices with police caution tape. So that was an interesting choice. I didn't go that far, but did create a flyer that provided to all of you guys via email. There's a copy at the very, very back of your packet as well. And had that sent out to, through the Knox notification email, had the communications director for schools distribute it to the central office employees there, and then had Allison Rogers in the Sheriff's Office Finance distribute it to the commanders. So, like I said, just part of an effort to help people understand who we are, what we do, and sort of what the expectations they should have if we come in to do an audit. We really want to cultivate a positive image and hopefully have people not be anxious when the scary auditors come by. So next, just a couple of notes. We have our renewal for High Bond, which is our audit software. We'll get that paid following the new fiscal year. And then I've just listed the 2 remaining Audit Committee meeting dates there, one for September 9th, one for December 12th, both at 9 a.m., both on a Thursday. So if we need
Let's hold
time out,
that
yeah.
to, we'll get to that on the end of this agenda overall,
Sure.
because right now I don't know how we do it.
Okay, that's fine.
It's gotten kind of in just like a,
Sure.
pick a number. So.
One last thing that's not listed here, just a little bit of personal news. So wanted to announce that the Internal Audit Department will soon have its own First Lady. I got engaged last month to Madison Armstrong, who's a better internal auditor than I'll ever be. And I've been told that it's every woman's dream to have news of her engagement entered officially into the public record. So there you have it.
And all your duties and obligations.
She did jokingly say she's going to find this recording and send it to her friends. So.
Does that mean it needs to be capitalized in the minutes that he made that declaration?
I don't know if I have to go
I'm
that
just
far.
wondering, I know generally where you live, generally where she lives, so y'all figure it out. So.
All right, let's turn to page 4. Page 4 is the proposed audit plan for fiscal year 25. Before we get into it, a couple of caveats. All planning is subject to staffing, right? Our department is only as good as the productive and qualified employees we have on staff. Very thankful for Richard, Lori, and Harrison. Hope that we can add some, great people going forward to really help us get this plan and tackle it. Second, I think audit plans should always be flexible because risks and threats are flexible. So, I think I reserve the right sort of to change this, add on to it if new things pop up, similar to what we did in 2020 with COVID. Now that said, let's jump into it. So the first item, schools fleet management, there's the proposed objective, sort of mirrors what we did for the general county. Won't say much more about that than I did earlier, but we are already in progress on that one. The second item is an audit of PBA's city-county building space utilization. As I spoke earlier, space was routinely identified as a pain point during our risk assessment meetings, and PBA has indicated, about those critical renovations that are needed. If we're at 100% capacity, how do you do the renovations? Where do you put the employees when the repairs are occurring? So anyway, how in the world do you audit space utilization, right? ultimately, in my mind, this audit is more of a review designed to highlight an issue for Knox County Commission and the Knox County Audit Committee. There may not be any findings, but it may just be a review of, hey, here, we know this issue. We need to have a conversation greater as a commission or as a government about how we plan to tackle this in the years coming forward. So just think it's important to take a look at that area and sort of formally document some of those concerns. Number 3 is a petty cash audit. I think this will be a pretty small audit engagement. It was identified as a potential area of concern, though, especially regarding reimbursements out of those petty cash accounts. Are those reimbursements actually expenses that would be warranted as petty cash? And then also some accounts, petty cash accounts that exist, but they haven't been utilized in 5, 6, 7 years. Why do we keep those open, right? It's just an unwarranted risk. Let's examine closing those. So we'll do a review. We'll see if the appropriate transactions are occurring and whether or not those accounts need
Hey,
to be
on the petty
restricted.
cash items, we usually do at the end of this is, I guess, an election year in some of the offices, if they turn over, I think we do some petty cash audits. I could be mistaken, Perry. I don't know if you remember. Pardon?
He said all cash gets a review at that time.
Okay. Well, that's, so,
Sure.
all right, I won't call it petty cash, you're right, but, so, I don't know, we just need to make sure, regardless of this, because we won't meet again until after September 1, so.
Right.
I know sometimes we have to figure out who's covering where, on that turnover from, I guess, August 31 to September 1, whatever, so,
Sure.
as an aside.
Yeah, that's good information. We'll work with Perry and Finance and make sure we coordinate. Okay, so number 4 is the Knox County Schools payroll audit. I feel like we've been circling around this one for a long time. Part of it is just because of how large the audit is, and also just because there's been so many compensation and payroll changes happening at schools. But we do want to get into it, especially now following the compensation study implementation. So we'll sort of work on scoping that area down, make it manageable, but still hopefully a valuable project for schools finance. If you turn the page with me, at the top of page 5, there's the Knox County Sheriff's Office Fleet Management Audit. Again, I think fleet management can be a high-risk area where some outside review is needed. I think we saw that in the findings that we discussed today. I want to continue with that series of audits. It didn't make sense at the initiation of all of this to put all 3 together because they all have separate governance structures and policies, procedures. So plan to have the schools and sheriffs have both those projects done and reported in FY25. The next 5 items there are our non-audit services. So first you have the property assessor attestation. Lori has sort of already started some pre-planning for that project as we look at that, as Jim mentioned, that August-September timeframe with the new assessor coming into office. So we'll make sure that's completed timely and that all inventory is transferred from the outgoing assessor to Mr. Ballard. Then we also want to take a look, do a control risk evaluation for the circuit court with their cash handling process. It's certainly not that we think that they're doing anything wrong. It's more from the perspective of they're handling a lot of fees each and every day. So with more money coming in, the process of collecting those funds just needs to be very well controlled. The third item is looking at the grants, time tracking, and leave allocation. So we spoke with Jenny Holden in community development about the process, and I think it could just use a little bit of outside assurance. Again, not saying anything's inherently wrong, but it's pretty complex when you're working with multiple grants, multiple employees. How do you track that employee's time, leave, their time, what they worked on, apply it to specific grants? So just want to add some additional assurances there. Number 4 is the Sheriff's Office Open Records Request, CRE. And this is really just included because of how frequently those open records requests end up in the media. We want to be transparent to the public and just make sure that that process is being handled appropriately. So we'll provide some assurance in that area. Last, sort of a standing item for Dynetics, their IT engagement. Don't feel like I need to lock in a specific engagement for IT right now because IT changes so rapidly. But we would like to utilize them again in some capacity, so sort of stay tuned on that. And then finally, the third section is internal audit initiatives. So as a reminder, these are just sort of things we want to accomplish internally for our department to make us a better internal audit shop. So the first two, again, are standing items, obviously the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline, the FY26 risk assessment that I talked about earlier. Then we also want to take a look at the formatting of our audit reports. It's been a while since those have been refreshed. The shell of our reports is sort of antiquated, and we have to spend a lot of time on the back end, moving around headers and footers and tables of contents and, playing around in Word. It'll drive you crazy. So I think we'll refresh that shell, make it a little easier to work with. Then next is a review actually of the Audit Committee Charter and the Knox County Charter provisions regarding internal audit. I think the Audit Committee Charter was updated, I believe, in 2018. So, 6 years later, probably due for a review and just to make sure it has what we want it to have. So I think
And for that audit committee charter, I've, in the past, gathered all the, the initial statute, whatever you'd call it, ordinance, and then it had several changes, and they were never homogenized into an ongoing document. But whenever you start that, I can compare notes and make sure you got it. And you're probably right about that last one, and really that had to do with defining the terms of people on the audit committee. That was one of the things it talked about. But there's been other issues there. But now, Knox County Charter revisions, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the charter provisions that sort of set up internal audit as a function.
Okay, so you're talking about internal audit there and not the audit.
Exactly, yeah,
Okay.
internal audit.
Okay. Because I know there's an internal audit section in there somewhere. I don't remember all of it. But certainly let's look at it and see what else it needs.
Sure, yeah, it's in the charter, and I don't think it's ever, to my knowledge, has been updated. You sort of think how in the charter the county mayor was referred to as the county executive. Well, I'm referred to as the county internal auditor.
No, you're
So-
the county auditor, I think,
wow.
something like that.
Yeah, yeah, so.
Yeah, it's a little off, but the other thing is I can't remember which documents we can just agree to change and make a recommendation and get commission to approve it, as opposed to, the only one I remember where we had to put it on the ballot was to change the outside auditor requirements. So, I don't know, I assume most of the things we could change internally.
I think so, but we'll work with the law department and
Right.
confirm that when
Yeah,
we get to that.
Just keep me praised on that one.
Sure. The fifth item there is just sort of a review with a peer review checklist. So ALGA, the Association of Local Government Auditors, they put out a checklist that peer reviewers can sort of utilize to just ensure that other shops are in compliance with the yellow book. So our thought was, hey, let's basically just do our own peer review of ourselves, make sure we're in compliance with every element of that checklist. Think we are, but always good to make sure. The last thing there is sort of a continuous audit initiative. So continuous auditing would be things that are sort of automated reviews, right? So that'd be like, for example, an analysis of vendor addresses as compared to employee addresses to make sure there aren't any conflicts of interest. And that's something that can be pretty easily set up once you have the data, and ongoing as new vendors are added, add that data in, checks it against employee addresses.
Yeah.
Other items could be, things like review flags. Say there's a charge that comes in at $9,980, and that's right under the $10,000 capitalization threshold. Maybe it gets flagged and sent over to internal audit for review. So just want to spend some time sort of developing that program. I think really the lift there is just getting the data, and then, we'll figure out a way to automate as much of that review as possible, but sort of do that as an ongoing task. So that's it for the FY25 audit plan. I think it's a robust plan, a plan that gets us involved with schools, the sheriff's office, general county government, and even the county adjacent organizations like PBA. I think overall the work is hopefully going to be a value add for Knox County as a whole. All right, let's sort of run through these last few pages. Page 6 is the control risk evaluation sheet. Nothing new there since our last meeting. Haven't done any control risks since then. Page 7 is the hotline summary. Did have 3 new hotline cases. I think if I recall correctly, one was a non-county issue, One was referred to another department for their remediation, and then one was actually investigated, reported to management, and management took action to resolve the issue. So if we have time during the executive session, once Dynetics finishes up, I'd like to discuss that one as well. The last few pages are the open recommendations. Only new items there are the recommendations from the two reports you heard about today. To Jim's point, some of those recommendations have probably already been remediated. It's probably just a timing issue of when I added them to this and not really thinking to go back and sort of update them. But we'll monitor that going forward, make sure that that is totally updated.
When those get updated, say, this 1 year to get have it resolved has always seemed like too long of a time period to me. Now, maybe some things could require that much time, but once you get information that you've got responses or whatever, I assume you then somehow in your system documented what you received, and even though it could be questions like we were raising today, we may not see those particulars, but I mean, you would know that they've been taken care of.
Sure,
and
yeah, and-
documented. It kind of falls off the radar screen. I mean, we see the list, and every once in a while, somebody will have a question about it, but then, then they fall off again, and I think, so.
Yeah.
I think we're relying on you a lot to make sure that everything is like you're getting rid of your hard drives. Make sure we kind of know what happened to those items.
Sure.
So,
Sure, I'll keep you apprised of the actions that get taken, and if we close that recommendation or not. We get the responses, and in our audit software, there is a place to formally document it. If we feel that the response has totally mitigated the risk in conversation with them and based on the response, we usually won't do follow-up testing. Where it's a significant issue, like the sheriff's office IT inventory, we may come back and do some
and
testing.
I don't know if there's some way to flag on here, highlight some of the rows or something where something has been resolved, because, we don't meet that often, so sometimes we don't always have these in our memory as to
Sure.
exactly what the issues were, so that would be helpful.
Sure.
All right.
So last thing, that's it for the packet itself. However, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that today, as Jim has pointed out, is the final audit committee meeting for Commissioner Schoonmaker, Commissioner Beeler. We just wanted to take a moment to thank them for their service on the audit committee. So my records show that Commissioner Schoonmaker has served since March of 2016, which is before I even started with the county, and then Commissioner Beeler has served since September of 2020. And I know it's often a thankless job, so we actually wanted to present you guys just with a small token of our gratitude. We had a couple of plaques made up. They just say, outstanding public service presented to John Schoonmaker and Richie Beeler in appreciation of 4 years of service to the Knox County Audit Committee and 8 years of service. So bring these up to you guys.
I am overwhelmed. Thank you. That's awesome. That is awesome. Wow. Wow. Above and beyond.
So that's it for me. I'm finished.
Okay, okay, no more questions for Zach, and that was a very good presentation on everything, and again, once again, on both of the reports, as Richard covered them. Okay, item 11, the dates for future audit committee meeting. We started off years ago of commission meets on Mondays, either workshop or regular meeting, and we usually tried to tie in on those same days. Maybe have them an hour earlier or something like that. So that's kind of how we pegged it, and then it started getting kicked around somewhere, different times. And now that they don't even have the workshop meeting, I don't know the logical time for us to say, we picked some on Thursdays here, and we can leave them like that. I didn't know if there's anything more, and I know, both of you guys want to be on commission next year, but I'm sort of looking for a logical, is some way to peg when audit committee would be meeting, other than just, I sort of have zeroed in on the months that I think work, because we're required to have, I think, 4 meetings a year, and we usually end up with 5. So.
May I make a suggestion?
Yes.
After September 1st, the commission will make their selections for the two.
Correct.
Or excuse me, three commissioners that will serve on this committee. So after the September 1st, you may want to get with those people
Right.
and find out what their schedules are before you assign a meeting date.
Right, well, and again, I was just kibitzing here a little bit as to how to do this. We'll leave them as they are right now, and I think Ted even asked me, did I need to have the one listed on here for, today, September, no. This has already been changed. I actually had today's left on there because that's the only one I could be absolutely sure of was that one's scheduled for today. So, but we'll look at that. And if you recall, the last change to the Audit Committee charter was to define a little bit the number of years and time you could serve, but was also some language in there that if you're currently on the Audit Committee and you stay on another 4 years, it wasn't mandatory, but the preference would be for you to stay on the Audit Committee because we cover so many things that don't just end, with the end of the year, and just like, things that we do in an executive session. So, but I realize we're going to have, that group. I would hope Commissioner Jay would stay on simply because he's going to be the only remaining commissioner on there that has some of the history to this. And, but, I'll mention that, and then I don't know, I leave it up to the commission, however they let people pick whatever committees they want to be on outside of that, so. But right now, we still have the, I'm just wondering if I had, somehow, I don't remember. Anyway, all right, so we've taken care of item 11. Other business was going to be our two departing members, and I really appreciate. John's been on this you've been on this ever since I've started on all this. So, and I know all your work on Finance Committee and everything else. You've kind of impressed me lots of times with your awareness of the financials and the depth of things. So, and Rich, I haven't dealt with you as much, but you guys, it was critical that y'all were on here, so I appreciate it. And the last one we have is we're going to have to take a vote on this executive session. And I was going to ask, are the Zach, where are the folks from Dynamics here?
They are. They're in the back.
I was wondering if that was them back there. Pardon? Yeah. Well, I thought that's probably who they were. So I won't ask you to introduce them right now, but so that's who we'll be meeting with upstairs, and it's going to be in the finance conference room. Hopefully, they've got a little feel for what the audit committee does and some of the things you look at. So. What I need now is a motion that we go into a confidential, non-public executive session under this Tennessee Code 9-3-405, subdivision D1 through D5.
I'll make a motion that did you need to say something?
If I would, I think to keep in strict compliance with the open meetings law, you ought to itemize, in the way I see it, you're going under D1 because we're following up on a hotline summary. That's a confidential, non-public record. So that's and then under D3, pending or ongoing audits or audit-related investigations, which is what we're going up under. I would suggest that you make that motion that specifically under D1 and D3.
I think that's what I meant to say.
Well, you see.
Okay, but I initiated this because I wanted it to be with Dynamics on just information as to what they've been doing. So,
I was going to say, I'm prepared to make a motion if you're.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we go into a non-public executive session under Tennessee Code annotated 9-3-405, subdivision 9, number 1, and 9, number 3.
You mean D, I think. All right. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Nay. All right, so the ayes have it, and we will now, I will make one comment to folks from Dynamics here. There is a large, this is a state statute, not Knox County, that grants Audit Committee the right to go into private, non-public executive sessions. That was something that was probably made effective a few years after the Audit Committee became on board here. The state put out here's any counties that don't have an Audit Committee, here's your guideline, here's your template. We got grandfathered in because we were already had an Audit Committee charter approved by the state. But that list of items that can't be released publicly is a long list. It's a lot of pages, and so, but there, you can go through there and find things that fit us exactly. I mean, a lot of it has HIPAA stuff and things like that, or employee information. But just for your information, that's how we were able to do this, and it is confidential, and so it's not, we don't have recordings or anything else. So with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
So moved.